Hi everyone, welcome to the Panhandle Research and Technology Tour Plus, hosted by the Panhandle Research and Extension Center in Scottsbluff, Nebraska. This event was recorded on December 2nd, 2020.
Welcome back again, everyone. I'm Jeff Bradshaw, host for this session. I'm the entomologist here at the Panhandle Research and Extension Center. And Xin Qiao is going to be presenting today. He's our assistant professor of biological systems engineering and extension specialist focusing on water and irrigation management for us out here in the Panhandle. And it's my pleasure to provide this forum for you today to see Xin's irrigation research update, which I believe he'll follow up with some updated information at the end of this presentation, followed by a Q&A. So Xin, the presentation is off to you.
Today, I'm very glad to talk to you about some of the exciting irrigation research update. We'll cover the most recent research we have done on beans, sugar beet, corn, and some other things. This slide gives you a brief introduction of everything that happened in 2020. So the first one I wanted to talk about is the yield analysis for the fields that was impacted under Gering-Fort Laramie Irrigation District back in 2019. As you all remember, it happened in July and continued for 35 days without water. And we were all wondering about what was actual yield impact. So in order to quantify that, we collected yield and agronomy data from 42 fields that included corn, beans, and sugar beet. And those fields were either furrow or pivot irrigated, and they all received probably from ½ inch to 0.8 inches of rain during the cutoff. Most of them received during, I think that was the second week into that cutoff period. So after we analyzed those yield, the corn actually had probably 23 and 5% of yield loss. If we say 200 bushel per acre was the normal yield, and the beans had about 45% yield loss if 40 bushel per acre was the normal yield. And then sugar beet was the least impacted. It had about a 15% yield loss, considering 32 ton per acre was the normal yield. And the average sugar content was about 16.5%. That was pretty good. So beside the yield analysis or yield impact, we also wanted to find out, because everyone was doing things different, every field was different, we also wanted to find out and understand which practice can help sustain the yield during that kind of situation and which practice will negatively impact the yield. We'll break that into each crop type. For corn, we found out longer growing degree days and delayed harvesting had better yield. So from this standpoint, if you have a longer growing degree, longer maturity variety, you might be better off compared to a short maturity variety. And the second thing was heavier irrigation before cutoff actually decreased yield. The third thing was high nitrogen sometimes also decreased yield. And heavier soil had better yield. Strip till had better yield than minimum till or plow. For dry edible beans, same thing. If the beans had longer growing degree days and delayed harvesting, had better yield. And actually, in this case, more nitrogen resulted in better yield. Again, heavier irrigation before cutoff decreased yield, and minimum and strip till outperformed plow tillage. And for beans, furrow irrigated fields had better yield than pivot irrigated fields. Okay, so that's that for the yield analysis. The next thing we want to talk about is during this summer, we collaborate with Dr. Bob Harveson, and we have developed a disease monitoring system for sugar beet with the help of funding from Western Sugar. So this project, we utilize very cheap and simple temperature and relative humidity sensor, and we live transmit those data into an online platform and perform the calculation over there. So this has the great advantage in a way that you no longer have to go to the field and download the data logger readings. And also, since the data is lively transmitted, it is also lively processed online. So when you go online, you will see the disease index for that particular field right away. So let's go ahead, go to the website and take a look how the reporting system looks like. So after you log into this website, and you will see there's a brief explanation of daily infection risk for all the values. Well, first of all, you will see a map. It has several dots on it. Each dot is an actual monitoring station. So once you click on the dot, a table should pop up on the right-hand side. And with the table has a disease infection value. Also, dot itself is colored. So a green colored dot is a low infection risk for that day or for the past 2 days. And then a yellow color represents a moderate infection risk, while a red dot represents the field is under high infection risk. The color of the dots, as well as the table, they are all being lively updated. Next, we're going to talk about irrigation strategies for dry edible beans. This year, we design our irrigation treatment. We break that into 8 treatments. The first 5 is a ramped treatment. Very easy to understand. Just simply increase the dosage of irrigation from dry land all the way to 133%, which means that will be over irrigated at an increment of 33%. Beside that, the other 3 treatments, I call that cut off early, cut off middle, and cut off late. The intention of this is to simulate the situation that happened in last year, and I wanted to give you an answer. If the crop are significantly stressed during either of these growth stage, what could happen? Last year, we could have give you the yield results, but our whole field were hailed out. So there was no yield results from 2019. Anyways, on the column number 2, you will see the total number of irrigation we have applied for each treatment, and also some note on the agronomy information. For the cutoff treatment this year, cutoff early simply, it was no irrigation before June the 29th. So the beans went for no irrigation for almost 1 month since planting. And the middle cutoff was no irrigation from June the 29th to August the 1st. And the late cutoff was no irrigation after August the 1st. We took some aerial photo to better show the treatment effect. So in this case, we show you the aerial imagery in 3 different dates for 4 different treatments. So the first column is early cutoff treatment. The second one is dry land, which is 0 irrigation treatment. The third column is a full irrigation treatment. And the fourth column is a late cutoff treatment. So from the images, it's pretty self-explanatory. Early cutoff almost was the same as full irrigation or late cutoff. I will share with you the yield data or update that yield analysis results on our website once everything is ready. This slide shows you the different irrigation treatments we applied for corn this year. So very similar to beans, 8 treatments. 5 treatments were ranked, and also there was a cutoff treatment. But the cutoff treatment in this case, it's a little bit different. We had a 1-week cutoff, a 2-week cutoff, and 3-week cutoff since the starting of tasseling, also to simulate what happened last year. And these are the treatment effect. So 1 week, all the corn, it looks kind of yellowish on August the 14th, even for the full irrigation treatment. That was because we had a very bad spider mite problem during this year. It started from our very dry treatment and just slowly encroaching to all other treatment plots nearby. So that's why it looks kind of yellow for all treatments. So in this case, the 1-week cutoff, actually, it doesn't look that bad, but the 2-week cutoff since tasseling, that became to look kind of dry. And let's take a look at what happened to the soil water content. So this shows you the soil water content in the 1-week cutoff treatment and 2-week cutoff treatment. These sensors we use were watermark sensors, and if the readings goes up, that means the soil is drying up, and if there's a big drop, that means the soil has been wetted with irrigation or rainfall. We installed 3 sensors, actually 4 sensors, at 8 inches, 16 inches, 24, and 48 inches. So I want to show you what happened here. The 1-week cutoff, so it started roughly from July the 19th, and you can see from there till August the 2nd, all the sensor readings are gradually going up, and it's drying the soil. The surface soil became the driest, which is a blue line, and then following by the 16 inches, and also the crop was using water at 24 inches. And then for the 2-week cutoff, again, it started from July the 19th, and it goes till August the 16th almost. It used all the water available at every single depth from 8 inches to 24 inches. And the sensor was responsive to the irrigation after August 16th, but only at the very top surface. These 2 graphs shows you 3-week cutoff on the left and also full irrigation on the right. Again, the cutoff started from July the 19th. And in this case, after 3 weeks, everything was used up to 24 inches, whereas the 100% irrigation on the right, the soil remains relatively wet throughout the whole time. The sugar beet irrigation treatment was slightly different. So this year we used a product called Aquamax. It's a polymer. And we combine that with irrigation treatment such as dry land or full irrigation or half irrigation. So the half irrigation simply means it cut the frequency into half, but not the irrigation rate. For example, if during peak growing season, if I apply 2 inches of water for my full irrigation treatment, the half irrigation only means, and each time I apply 1 inch, the half irrigation only means I only applied 1 inch, but at a full rate during that week. Again, this slide shows you the treatment effect. The first column is a half irrigation treatment combined with 2 polymer application, and the second column is full irrigation without any polymer applied. The third one is a dry land and without any polymer applied. The fourth column is a full irrigation with one-time polymer applied. And the fifth one is dry land with only 1 polymer applied. What was very interesting is if you look at the third row, the imagery taken on August the 14th, the first block on the very left, the half irrigation with 2 polymer applied look even better or look the same compared to the full irrigation without any polymer applied. And also the dry land with 1-time polymer applied on the very right looks slightly better than the dry land with 0 polymer applied in the middle on August 14th. Again, we're analyzing the yield right now and also waiting for the results of sugar content from Western Sugar. After we have that, we'll update that on our website. So that's all I have for you today. Thank you very much, and hope you all stay safe. All right, so should I go ahead and talk about some of the yield updates? Since I think the video was made actually before we done anything on the yield.
Yeah, I think you should go ahead and should be able to share your screen, Xin.
Okay, so let's see. So basically, just wanted to share with you some of the yield analysis. This one is for sugar beet with a polymer treatment. So again, there are 3 treatments I listed on the horizontal bar, which is a dry land and half irrigation and also full irrigation. And then in each panel from left to right, those are 0 polymer applied, 1 polymer applied, or 2 polymer application applied. So to me, the interesting thing is if you look at the first panel, it kind of follow the amount of irrigation, which is dry land had the lowest yield, and then half irrigation, and then full irrigation. But after, if you move to the middle panel, after you applied a polymer 1 time, and then the half irrigation almost had the same yield as a full irrigation. We didn't find any statistical difference on that, but numerically you can see the change on that yield. And then if you move to the third one, the 2 polymer application, this time the interesting thing is it kind of, I don't know if it's a right word to say, but looks to me the polymer, 1 more time polymer applied kind of boosted the yield for the full irrigation treatment. So that's what I have for the sugar beet yield analysis. And then if we go back to, I'll stop my screen share and just talk to you. So if you, actually I can go back to my slides. I have it over here. Share the slides. Can you see my screen right now?
Yes.
Okay. So on the corn, again, we had spider mite problem actually really bad. And we missed the application timing on that. So the highest corn yield we made was around 165 to 170 bushel per acre. So what we saw, I think this might be interest to a lot of you, which is a yield impact from the cutoff treatments. So if we had 1 week cutoff from tasseling, starting from July the 19th, there was about 6% yield decrease from our highest yield, which again, is around 165 bushel per acre. And then if it's 2 week cutoff, we saw a 15% yield decrease from the full yield. The 3 week, we messed up the irrigation treatment actually. We started that cutoff a little bit late. So it had about 6% yield loss. So again, I think from this we can kind of tell, corn is probably more resilient to drought stress than we thought. And we can also tell that by, if you look at all the water movement, the soil water content in the profile, the cutoff treatments, if you stress the plants enough, it will try to actively grow the roots and have more root activity to withdraw the water from deeper depth. And then dry edible beans, this one's more interesting. Our combine was not calibrated, so our yield was off. If you, the absolute yield, the highest we saw was 80 bushel per acre. I don't think that's correct. But on a relative scale, the cutoff early treatment, which is no irrigation before June the 29th, there was no yield decrease at all. And the middle cutoff treatment, we saw a 40% yield decrease. On the late cutoff, we saw a 20% yield decrease comparing from the full yield. So that's all the updates I have. And I think now we open to any questions.
Thank you, Xin, for that update on the irrigation program and your work on corn, beans, and sugar beet with that. I'll go ahead and kick off on with a couple questions here.
Sure.
Let's see if I can find my questions. Here we go. So one question I've got is, thinking back to your on-farm analysis related to the Gering irrigation ditch situation last year. So you showed that delayed harvest and dry beans, delayed harvest and dry bean usually increases dry bean risk to cutworm damage, and at least with our indirect harvest operations, sometimes a greater risk to wind loss or being snowed on, as John had mentioned earlier, and those sorts of risks. But I think you had showed that there was actually an improved yield in some of those fields that you analyzed with delayed harvest. Why do you think that would have been?
Well, this is my assumption because we didn't have any, we don't have any sensor readings from those fields. So this is just my assumption. I think the delayed harvesting kind of allows the plants to get back or recover. And it just allows them to get back to the routine if the temperature or all the settings were right, and start to use water and nutrients again and developing the pods and all that. But again, we don't have any actual data. We only have the final yield. And this is what we saw from the yield analysis, no matter from furrow irrigated field or pivot irrigated field.
So what you think is rather, maybe it might be more accurate to assume that rather than delayed harvest necessarily, it might have been delayed cutting more specifically.
Right.
So,
yeah,
the plants obviously had to be standing in the field for longer to recover
yes.
that soil moisture.
Yes.
So
yeah,
that makes sense. So I'll go ahead with another question here. Not seeing any from the crowd here online. Great crowd, by the way. Thank you all for joining us. And since I'm an entomologist, I have to ask you this question, Xin. Sometimes growers ask me if their irrigation program can control their spider mite problem. I know you weren't necessarily looking for this, but did you observe any possible relationship between irrigation amount or irrigation timing and some of that spider mite damage that you were observing in the field?
I'll try my best. This is just based on observation. And again, I was actually looking for help from you. But anyways, we saw that the spider mite issue emerged from the dryland treatment first. So I think, yes, it is related to irrigation or amount. And then it started to encroach into the other more heavily irrigated treatment plots. but what we didn't see was they probably was equally infected, just visually observation. So the irrigation rates didn't um, help control the spider mite. I'm feeling really uncomfortable seeing this.
No, that's okay. I
Not my
understand.
expertise, but um, maybe Jeff, you can also help, try to solve this mystery. Another thing I was thinking was the spider mite, they started from low and grow to higher portion of the plants, right? Our sprinkler, they were above canopy. I mean, they're high, not truss rod high, but eventually they kind of into the canopy a little bit, but still considered as high sprinkler heights. So I wonder if you have a low height sprinkler package, again, maybe some of the attendees here can share some of their experience. That might help because you're directly applying the water down low. So we're applying water from a kind of a higher height, and we didn't see any correlation between the damage and irrigation amount. So maybe
Sure.
the sprinkler package can help a little bit.
Well, your observation that it just caught my attention when you said your observation was that it started in the dry plot first,
Right.
and that's what we would expect based on the biology of the spider mite, that we would expect them to occur first in the dry plots. And I think a lot of our growers would agree that their dry corners of their pivots is where you see the spider mite come in first, and then it encroaches from those directions. And
Right.
it's I think it's an interesting question. It's just a very difficult it's a difficult thing to study because you can never predict when spider mite populations are going to flare up like that.
Right.
Another question I've got that I can throw at you, and you sort of addressed this in your updated slides today with your yield. I'm interested in knowing if you thought, if you suspect that the polymer treatment would have saved the yield, again, thinking back to the irrigation ditch situation, if it were applied in the case of, loss of irrigation, say in sugar beet in particular, I think it looked like it recovered or had the best chance for recovery.
I think they did, according to our data, and probably the one-time application would be most economical. And the one time, when we apply only one time, our half irrigation treatment plots had the same yield as the full irrigation treatment plots. So at a situation in 2019, I think if you apply the polymer, that could help. But also, I'm glad the company rep is not here, so I can talk on just looking at the field analysis from the field in 2019, sugar beet had the least yield impact from that 35-day cutoff. So I think they're by nature more resilient to drought stress. And we didn't have yield, but we did have some moisture sensor in the ground. What we saw was sugar beet started to draw water even down into 4 feet depth. So I guess you have to weigh the price of the product and also kind of have a sense for the climate during that growing season, and to see whether if it's economical to apply or not. But at least from this year, I think it did. It did save the yield.
So how is that polymer applied in overhead irrigation situation?
There are 2 ways you can apply that. One way is suggested by PARTT, and the other way is what we did at small scale research plots. So we loaded up in like a herbicide sprayer, but you need to have a agitation pump to agitate that chemical so it doesn't condense or be really hard to apply. but the companies claim that you can inject through your pivot irrigation system. So I'm assuming we didn't try that, but probably we'll try that next year with a higher flow rate at a pivot irrigation system and that natural agitation. That's what the company suggests you to apply through.
So there wouldn't be any issue with it hardening up. Does it stay sort of a gel form? And
I think that might be, we don't know. I have not tried that.
well, let's see, looking for anyone that's got some questions from the audience. I see some familiar virtual faces in the participant list here. Again, appreciate everyone logging in and engaging. If you've got some questions about irrigation management and the resulting effects on yield and some of the observations that Xin shared, please type them in the Q&A.
And always, please feel free to call me or write me an email. Yeah.
Well, I think we've got a quiet crowd here this morning, and we're getting close to that lunch hour. So I think if it's okay with Emily, we'll stop here. So thank you again for joining us today.